Mosquitoes are often called the world's most dangerous animals, and for good reason. The diseases they carry, malaria, dengue, Zika, and others, kill more than 770,000 people every single year. That death toll is staggering. It dwarfs the impact of many other global health threats combined. And yet these tiny insects continue to outsmart our best efforts to control them. Here is something that might surprise you. There are roughly 3,500 mosquito species on Earth, but only about 100 of them have evolved to specifically target humans. Scientists call this anthropophilic behavior, a fancy term for what is essentially a deadly preference for human blood among these human-seeking species. Aedes aegypti stands out as particularly dangerous. The female of this species has become remarkably skilled at finding us, using a sophisticated combination of sensory cues to track down her next meal. You would think that after decades of research, we would have figured out how to trap these insects effectively. The reality is quite humbling. Current suction traps, the workhorses of mosquito surveillance and control, operate at only 10 to 50% effectiveness. Think about that for a moment. Even our best traps miss half or more of the mosquitoes they are designed to catch. Why? Because we have never truly understood how mosquitoes actually fly toward their targets. We know they respond to carbon dioxide, heat, visual cues, and body odors, but we cannot predict when or how they will change direction, accelerate towards something interesting, or slow down to investigate. Without that predictive power, our traps are essentially guessing games. This knowledge gap is exactly what the research we are about to explore aims to close. The researchers needed data, good data, lots of it, and capturing the three-dimensional flight paths of tiny, fast-moving insects in real time is remarkably difficult. So they built something special. At the heart of their solution was a custom experimental chamber. Picture a trapezoidal mesh enclosure stretching 5 meters deep, kept at a constant 28 degrees Celsius with 45% humidity. These conditions matter because mosquitoes behave differently depending on temperature and moisture in the air. The controlled environment ensures that what gets measured reflects natural mosquito behavior, not stressed reactions to unfamiliar conditions. Facing this enclosure sat the photonic fence monitoring device, or PFMD for short. The name sounds elaborate, but the concept is elegant in its simplicity. Two infrared cameras work together in stereo, surrounded by rings of 850 nanometer LED lights. These diodes illuminate the scene against a retroreflective background, essentially creating a high-contrast stage where mosquitoes appear as bright moving dots against a dark field. The system captures images every hundredth of a second, fast enough to track even the most erratic flight maneuvers in 3 dimensions. The researchers released 50 mosquitoes at a time and recorded their movements for 20 minutes per session. From these experiments, they gathered approximately 22,000 distinct flight trajectories. Each trajectory represents a continuous segment of a mosquito's path through space, averaging just under a second in duration. That might sound brief, but when you multiply these short paths across thousands of insects, you end up with millions of position data points. This became the foundation for everything that followed. The researchers wanted to understand something fundamental about mosquito behavior. Where exactly do these insects aim when they hunt for human hosts? To answer this question, they designed experiments that paid tribute to pioneering work from decades earlier. Back in 1951, a researcher named A.W. Brown conducted experiments with dark-clothed mannequins to study mosquito attraction. The modern team decided to honor that classic approach by having human subjects wear dark clothing while the tracking system recorded thousands of flight paths, what they discovered was striking. The mosquitoes showed a clear preference for the human head time. After time, the flight trajectories converged around this region of the body. This finding aligns with earlier research on landing locations, but now they had the three-dimensional data to prove it in exquisite detail. Something else caught their attention in the tracked paths. The mosquitoes slowed down near targets. Their flight speed decreased as they approached the head and body. This deceleration suggests the insects were preparing to land, shifting from search mode to approach mode. But the most compelling evidence came from what they called the Janus outfit experiment picture. A person wearing clothing that is white on one side and black on the other. Carbon dioxide and body odor remain completely symmetric around this person. Both sides should be equally attractive if those cues alone drove behavior. They were not. The flight trajectories concentrated overwhelmingly on the black side. This simple but elegant experiment demonstrated something crucial: visual cues dominate mosquito target selection, even when other sensory information remains balanced. The dark color acts as a powerful attractant, drawing the insects toward one side, while the white side receives far less attention. The researchers needed a mathematical framework capable of capturing the subtle complexities of mosquito flight behavior. They turned to something called stochastic Langevin dynamics at its core. This approach breaks the problem into two distinct components. There is a deterministic force that depends on where the mosquito is located in space and how fast it is flying. Think of this as the deliberate part of the motion. The forces the mosquito actively generates with its body scaled by its body mass. Then, there is a random component modeled as Gaussian white noise, which captures all the unpredictable fluctuations that occur during flight. The real challenge was that these forces were unknown. The researchers could observe the trajectories, but they could not directly measure what forces were driving them. Their solution was elegant. They expanded the unknown forces using something called a basis function expansion. This is essentially a way of building up a complex function from simpler building blocks, much like constructing a complicated shape from basic geometric pieces. This transformation was crucial. What had been an intractable behavioral learning problem suddenly became a linear regression problem. The coefficients in this expansion encode everything about how mosquitoes behave. Each environmental cue, whether visual or chemical, corresponds to its own distinct set of coefficients. To actually find these coefficients from the experimental data, the researchers used Bayesian inference. The goal was to find the most probable values by maximizing what is called the posterior probability. In simple terms, they were asking a statistical question: given all the flight trajectories observed, what coefficients would most likely explain what they saw? This approach turns raw tracking data into a predictive model that can simulate mosquito behavior in entirely new situations. The real test came when the researchers began training their model on the enormous dataset they had assembled, more than 20 million data points extracted from mosquito-free flight trajectories. Each point representing a moment in time, a position in space, a velocity vector, all of it recorded while mosquitoes navigated environments containing both visual targets and carbon dioxide sources. The training process required the model to learn two distinct aspects of mosquito behavior simultaneously. First, the intrinsic active forces that govern free flight. The spontaneous turns, the acceleration patterns, the seemingly random exploratory movements that mosquitoes exhibit, even when no target is present. Second, the directed responses to environmental cues, the way a mosquito orients toward a dark shape accelerates toward a carbon dioxide plume, or adjusts its trajectory when multiple cues compete for attention. What made this approach so powerful was how the researchers validated their model. Rather than jumping straight to complex human targets, they first tested the model against simpler controlled experiments. Polystyrene, spheres of various sizes and colors, isolated carbon dioxide sources. These minimal experiments allowed the team to verify that their learned model correctly captured individual cue responses before attempting predictions for the far more complex case of a living human target. The validation results were striking. The model trained on those millions of trajectory points could accurately predict how mosquitoes would behave around human subjects it correctly anticipated. The head targeting phenomenon, it captured the deceleration patterns near targets that indicate landing preparation. Most importantly, it demonstrated that the combination of Langevin dynamics and Bayesian inference had successfully distilled the essential physics of mosquito host-seeking behavior from raw observational data. The model had learned to predict the hunt. The true value of this research lies not in elegant mathematics or impressive data sets, but in what it means for the real world. Right now, the tools we use to capture and monitor mosquitoes are surprisingly ineffective. Standard suction traps, the kind deployed worldwide for surveillance and control, catch only about 10 to 50% of the mosquitoes that approach them. That is a massive gap. It means most mosquitoes simply fly away, continuing their search for human hosts and their role in disease transmission. What the researchers have built is essentially a blueprint for doing better. Their model reveals exactly how mosquitoes respond to visual targets and carbon dioxide sources. It tells us where they slow down, where they accelerate, and what shapes and contrasts draw them in this. Knowledge allows us to design traps that work with mosquito behavior, rather than against it. Instead of hoping a mosquito wanders close enough to get sucked in, we can engineer devices that actively pull them in by presenting exactly the right combination of cues, in exactly the right configuration. The applications extend beyond traps. Consider the design of homes, schools, and public buildings. In regions where mosquito-borne diseases are endemic, understanding how mosquitoes integrate visual and chemical signals could inform architecture itself. Dark entryways, contrasting surfaces, and airflow patterns might all be rethought to make buildings less attractive or less accessible to host-seeking insects. This is the promise of quantitative science applied to public health. The model does not just describe behavior. It provides a foundation for predicting it, testing interventions, and measuring what works. Every percentage point improvement in trap effectiveness represents potentially thousands of lives saved.